Well, David, welcome to the Bad Marketing Sucks show.
Thank you
How are
for
you
having me.
today?
I'm
We're
good. I'm
glad to
good.
have you. Yes, we're glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I'm an artist, best known for a series of neon pink paintings that I make around the streets of London and various other places. But I mean, I've been painting for the last 23 years, so I haven't always been famous, well known, etc. As I am now. So there's sort of three parts to my career. The first 10 years were just as a vandal. I was making street art firstly, I was making it in legal sanctioned areas around London in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
And gradually, bit by bit, those areas were being closed down. So I had this sort of choice of either stop making art or paint illegally. And I chose the latter. And then after doing that for about 10 years, uh, things were getting a little bit spicy, and I had sort of friends and peers that were being sent to prison for doing graffiti.
Really?
Decided to take things a little bit more of a positive direction. So for the next 10 years, I then started an agency slash company called Joy Collective, which is still running today. We've been going for 13 years. And our kind of focus was mostly making work for brands. We were doing hand painted billboards, advertisements, mostly like out of home stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and then in the beginning of the pandemic, all of our work, all of our clients disappeared. And so I finally had a little bit of time. And so with that time, I started putting out the ideas that I'd been working on for the last 10 years, but never really had the confidence or the time to pursue
Hmm.
because I'd always been working on the business, started putting my own art out in the world and didn't expect it to, like, honestly didn't expect it to, but it kind of, yeah, caught fire. I grew a large social media following, and now that's become my full time career. So, whilst the agency that I started back in 2010 is still up and running, called the Joy Collective, and they do fantastic work, my sole focus now is really just me as a solo artist.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
So
That is-
from a solo artist standpoint, are you still just doing what you want to do and let it catch fire, or are you being commissioned to do things?
Yeah, so I mean, it's it's a mix. I mean, I'm most happy when I'm painting in the streets. That's really my happy place. There's nothing like the energy of making work outside. You've got the drunk guy shouting at you over here. You've got the dog attacking you over here. And you meet people from every single walk of life, like
Hmm.
millionaires walking past you, having a chat with you, to the homeless dudes and the homeless community you become really familiar with because you're seeing each other in these spaces, interacting, sharing a space for like a continued amount of time together.
Hmm.
And there's something about that energy that I love. But unless you're doing an outside mural for a brand,
Hmm.
for the most part, outside work is not paid for. So I'm in the lucky position where I'm able to do, say, one show a year of my paintings on canvas,
Hmm.
and then that will fund me for a year of painting in the streets. And so really, I've reached that kind of utopia point that a lot of artists, a lot of solo artists, are trying to get to,
Hmm.
which is I only take on the work that excites me and interests me. And my kind of strategy is always give away everything. Like, so my street art is free, and I'm happiest when I'm doing that.
Gotcha.
Very nice. Very nice.
All right. So before we ask a few questions, I just got to find out. So is the street art something that you're doing on canvas, or you're doing on buildings, or you're doing on uh, when you give that away for free? What does that mean?
Yeah, so every time I paint outside, I think the beautiful thing about street art is that it's the most accessible art form.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of gallery institutions and places that are built up with so much high prestige, to most people, they find those places intimidating to visit.
Hmm.
And they also feel like if I'm not an expert in art, then I can't have an opinion on these places. I know a lot
Yeah.
of people. The Tate Modern is a couple of minutes from my house, and I know a lot of people go there and are a little bit confused by what they're seeing, because the art is maybe not as accessible, or the education around that art is not really there to educate people on what they should be thinking and feeling about these pieces.
Hmm.
Whereas street art is instantly there. It's I paint on hoardings and brick walls and whatever surfaces I can find outside, and that, and I mean, I live in Shoreditch in East London, similar to like Williamsburg in Brooklyn, um, and various sort of other places around the world where the sort of street art hubs are. And those, it's like going to an art gallery, but you don't have to pay an admission fee.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have a degree. You can just walk around and you can appreciate the art, and you can like it or not like it, but you can feel free to have an opinion about it. And if you feel that strongly motivated, you can go and paint over it if you want to. If you feel like your voice is going to be stronger than what's there already, you can go and paint over it. There's no, you couldn't do that in a gallery space. That's something about the energy
Yeah.
of doing it outside.
That wouldn't work, would it? Yeah.
They frown on that a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's not good. Well, what effects have you seen in bringing art to life? How does it resonate with people? In what way?
As in how have I sit? Well. So I mean, I got a DM probably about a year ago now from a guy who confessed to for me to be his almost like his gateway drug into the art world. It was a really lovely email. He said, so there's something in London that we call a geezer, right? Which is like a man's man. You're Tony Soprano, strong, silent type. That's a geezer. And he was a self-confessed geezer. He said, I'm a geezer, and I would never admit this to my mates, but your work made me look at art. He said, I've never been interested in art before. I'd never looked at it before, but your art made me go and look at your art first. And then and because I liked it so much, I started looking at other artists. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing. And specifically because I make work with pink paint, my target demographic was certainly not geezers. I did not think that geezers would be interested in my work, but specifically because I make it out of pink paint. I think when I first started making my work, I had the idea for painting in pink. I discovered this neon pigment that they make in spray paint that is the brightest of any paint I'd ever seen before, and it's so beautiful that I just got a bit obsessed with it and wanted to explore it. And I think the beautiful thing about the pandemic was I just had time and no expectations. I wasn't expecting the work to be a success.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times when we start a project, one of the motivating factors is how can I make this commercially viable? And had I sat down and done that, I would have said, well, pink is probably not going to be that financially viable. There's since getting obsessed with pink, I've kind of looked into it as a color, and it's a color that's like frowned on within the art world, which sounds so bizarre, but it's like if you make pink pieces within traditional art, they're frowned upon. It's not like accepted. So it wouldn't have been the wise choice on paper to make work from pink. So I was not expecting anyone to resonate with it, to be drawn to it like they have been. But one of the experiences that I've had is my studio in Shoreditch. I can see out the window, and I can see a couple of my walls from the window. So I see people interacting with my work when I'm not there. Mm-hmm. So I'll see someone do a double take because it's so bright, and they cross over the road to go and take a photo with the piece. And that for me is a really beautiful thing. So I think had I have planned it and gone, I want to be the next Banksy, I want to do something I want to sell loads of paintings, I don't know that I would have been where I am now. Mm-hmm. What actually happened was I went, well, I think this is fun. This is something that I want to explore. There's a famous artist called David Cho who he famously painted the Facebook offices years ago and got paid in shares. So he's now a millionaire. Yeah. And he's quite well known. And I saw an interview with him, and he said, when I paint in the streets, I like to paint with black paint because it's hard and it's aggressive. And street art, I mean, is the art of rebellion. It's illegal in most places, and you can tell a story, you can get a message across. And I thought, well, I don't want my message to be hard and aggressive, because that's not me as a person. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to fight with my art. I'm trying to spread love and kindness and appreciation, and really seeing other people, noticing them. And so pink seemed the right choice, and I went with it. And the way that it grew, I mean, I started Instagram with 0 followers in 2020. Mm-hmm. And now I'm at something, I'm over 100,000 now anyway. And that's awesome. to find that many people, because I like to write goals, right? And I write ridiculous goals that I think are unachievable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually insane what's happened with my life since I've started that practice. And
Yeah.
I reckon I'm never one to recommend to recommend a technique that doesn't have science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So there must be some science to, I guess, opening up a space in your brain by having these goals in place. Because I don't really believe in manifestation. It all seems a bit weird that you would just sit and wish for something to happen. But I wrote down at the beginning of 2020, I want to have 10,000 followers on Instagram, because I thought that was ridiculous and unachievable.
Yeah.
But I thought, let's put this really like ridiculous high ceiling to shoot for. And I ended 2020 on 40,000 followers.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I honestly went into that year not expecting it to be a success. Literally just, I was like, let's just do something that's going to entertain me for this lockdown period that is going to last maybe 3 months. They said in the beginning, like, 3 months and then everything will be back to normal. I was always ready to go back to my day job. I always thought I'd be back painting walls for brands, because I enjoyed that work, and that was my bread and butter. But 3 months turned into 6 months, turned into 12 months. And here we are 4 years later, and I've got a whole career off of making art out of pink paint. It's insane.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow. So when you're doing painting for individual brands, paid work that you do, are you using
I think you guys have dropped out a bit there.
Can you hear us?
There you are. You're back.
Okay, great.
So when you're doing paid work for companies, branding type work through art, are you using pink for all of your base colors, or does it change based on the individual brand and branding their particular product?
Right. So I got when I do work for brands, and then I lost you.
Can you hear me? Or is it
Yes,
both of us?
got you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So the question was, when you do work for brands, are you still defaulting to pink, or are you working within, I guess, their brand colors?
Yeah, sure. So when I was working, for the 13-year period that I was working for Joy Collective, everything was pretty much given to us like to the letter of how the brand wants it. So very often it will be like, this is the Pantone, this is the size, this is exactly what we want. Often, I mean, because we are the experts in that field, a lot of times brands will ask us for our creative direction and our input. But we're very much guided by the brand and how they want the campaign to go. For my own stuff, if I get contacted by a brand, I did get contacted actually by a big company that makes mobile telephones, and they wanted me to do something in not my color, and it was a hard no. They were launching a new product, and they were like, we're going to be doing it with neon green. Do you think you could? And it was a no for me, because that's not. At some point I might explore neon green, but at the moment I'm exploring neon pink. So so for me it has to be. And I take on very little brand work because I don't really need to, because most of my living is paid for by my clients who buy my paintings on canvas, and so and that means that I'm not, because when I first started, any brand that came to us, we would have to say yes, because we've got bills to pay, and like that's the struggle of the creative, I think, is when you first start making work, you can't really be picky with your clients. If you are able to be picky, then you can go so much further, because people see you in a certain light, because you're not having to take every single thing. But yeah, I think it's very difficult if you say yes to everyone, then you start to become almost like it almost like waters your brand down, because you're doing a little bit of this over here, a little bit of that over there. And I think now Joy Collective is very much we've kind of taken the power back now, and we sit our clients down and we go through we call it like a diagnosis, but we'll sit down with the client and we'll go from we'll firstly work out like, what are your objectives for this project.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is funny, because when a lot of clients go into a project, they don't actually know what their objectives are, which is always wild.
Yeah, exactly.
And then after a conversation, they actually realize their objectives are something that different to what they thought they were.
Yep.
and then we'll work out the best way to go about that as practicing artists for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll use our expertise to guide people in that way. Because I think it's when you work with creatives, it's really important to like listen to what they have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have a vision, but if you're coming to a creative, then maybe listen to what what you're paying them to bring to the table, you know.
Sure.
So it's like if a brand wants to come to me personally as a solo artist, that's it's an interesting conversation, because firstly I have to align with the brand. So that eliminates a great deal of people to begin with.
Yeah,
So
as it should.
so I have to align with the brand, and then we have to make cool shit. Like I'm not interested in doing something that's one, not gonna fulfill what the brand wants it to fulfill, but two, is gonna bring my standing down. So
yeah, exactly.
so I'm really kind of picky about what projects I take on.
Yeah.
And then with Joy Collective, like there's one thing we've learned that I think is so important, is make sure that the key decision maker for any project is on the call. And it's something we've had in the past where we'll go so far down the road with the project, and we even start doing designs and things like that. And then a key decision maker comes in and goes, no, this is what I don't want to do this. Because I mean, that's just the way things work. Often you get someone who's like younger in a company, who's more willing to take a risk, is more willing to collaborate, is more willing to do something that's not been seen before. And then you have the people whose job it is to protect the company. I think they are doing it from a fear, safety
Without
kind
a
of
doubt.
space.
Right.
Oh gosh,
But
we
they
see
come
that
in
all
and
the
they
time.
go, we've not worked with street art before. This is scary. It might alienate our clients.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to do something brave, and everything gets pulled back. So
Right.
And then it becomes very bland.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
very unmemorable. And I think that's why, from a marketing kind of principles and how things work, and just the way that our minds work, I think that's one of the reasons why Pink has done so well for you, is because it's different enough, but it's at a high enough quality that we are just drawn to those things. And I will not get too far into it because I'm not a neurologist or neuroscience, but there is something to be said for that, is that when we create things, create art, create the creative assets for our marketing campaign, if we look like everybody else, that part of our brain that processes it's going to say, I've seen it. They flush it out. But when it is different and at the level of quality that we desire, it's like you said, we cross the street to go take a picture with that because it's good, and it draws us to it. So I think that's why one of the reasons you've done so well with Pink is that it is different enough, but it's still at the standards and quality that people desire.
when I discovered that pigment, I couldn't believe that no one else was using it.
Yeah.
I almost felt like I discovered some insane secret.
Yeah.
I was, why is no one else using this? It's so bright, it's insane. And I think the next time, if you're listening to this, the next time you're somewhere where there is a lot of graffiti, just look at the pieces that stand out. I mean, I'm really careful about where I place my work. I don't put my work in amongst all of the other graffiti where it's just a set. Like I'm always looking for like a unique place to put my work.
Yeah.
And I think and you can parlay that out into real life. It's like I say to photographers, if you're posting on Instagram, there's so much photography on Instagram, and I'm probably going to scroll past your piece unless it's absolutely phenomenal. I'm probably going to scroll past it really quickly because there's so much photography on Instagram.
Yeah.
However, if I'm scrolling on LinkedIn and I'm seeing like mindset posts, and I'm seeing like here's how to boost video on your campaign, like whatever it's posted on Instinct, and then I see some cool photography, it's going to stand out because it's in that different space.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I learned from graffiti years ago. Is I remember this is during the first phase, the really illegal phase, and I was painting. There's railway lines outside of Clapham Junction Station, which is one of the busiest railway stations in the UK, and there was a big wall there that my friend and I painted, and we were just like, this, everyone's going to see this. There's like, I think there's something like, I can't remember the number, but it's an insane amount of commuters go through there every single day. There's going to be so many eyeballs on our stuff. We're really excited. and there was also like a couple of nights later, we then painted something on the way to Gatwick Airport. And it was like in the middle of a field. It was like this crazy long journey to get to it. We worked out where it was. Back then there was no Google Maps, so we had to just go driving until we could find this little back road. And so we painted this hoarding on the side to Gatwick Airport, and it was like tiny. It was like just in the middle of nowhere. And the amount of people that of other graffiti artists that we met that were like, "Oh, I saw your thing on the way to Gatwick," and no one mentioned Clapham Junction to us. And that was the first point where I was like, okay, there's so much graffiti in Clapham Junction that when you ride past it, it doesn't make an impact.
Yep.
Whereas you put something where you're not expecting to see it and everyone remembers it. And that's always stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Gosh. And go ahead.
Yeah, it's
so many
so
thoughts on
interesting. I think typically we always think of, in terms of branding and advertising, traditional forms, like television, radio, digital. What makes art so effective in that space, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think we're getting to the stage now. So Joy Collective, we've really pivoted because so we were really the first to do hand painted advertisements in the UK. There was Colossal Media in New York that were also doing it, but they used brushes, not spray paint. And we sort of like helped pioneer that industry. I mean, it's become an industry. But then as you do that, people see that it's making money, so it attracts people. There's now business people running graffiti companies who've never picked up a can of paint, or street art companies as they call them. And that to me is wild. But they just saw that there was money there, so they came in and like paid contracts to all the artists and really shut down the business. But now the work that's getting creative, I feel like when we first started doing it, we were really trying to do something different, something that would do the job of marketing, which is to stand out and get attention. Now the work that's being hand painted is, it's beautifully done. It's to a really high standard, but a lot of it is just they've taken the brand campaign poster that's the same that we'll see on the tube, we'll see it on the billboards, and then here's a hand painted version of it. That to me doesn't do the job. I remember when we did a campaign for Halo a few years ago, and we painted this beautiful like giant Halo piece, and then a couple of nights later we came back and like vandalized it, and we wrote "traitor" across the middle of it because the one of the lead characters in the series turned out to be a traitor. And it got millions of views on Reddit. It like went insane, and that's because it was something different. And I feel like what's being produced now is it's the same. I don't understand why they wouldn't just have put a poster there, because because you've painted it isn't special anymore.
Right.
When we first started doing these ads in like 2010, 2011, they were brand new. No one had seen that done before. But I know, I'm sure you've heard Gary Vee say, marketers ruin everything.
They do.
So like, so the hand painted mural was really cool. So I think in order to use art effectively now, you have to do something different. And and I think one thing so many brands do poorly is credit the artists that they're working with. Like I've got no shame in calling out Adidas. They are the fucking worst for it. Like they do not. They want everyone to believe that Adidas just is a group of people that just sits within Adidas HQ and comes up with all their ideas, because anyone who works on a project is white labeled and they do not get to speak about it. And I just think you're going to do your brand so much, like you're going to do so much for your brand if you give flowers to the artists. People will see that and they'll appreciate it. So if I was running a brand and I did a collaboration with an artist, I would be mentioning, tagging, like touting that artist to, like I'd be singing their praises from the hills.
Sure.
And so many brands are not willing to do that. It's wild.
So let me make sure I understand this. I'm kind of confused on this. So you're saying that a company will pay an artist to paint something on behalf of their brand illegally in a space, or is this done legally?
Yeah, so all of the work that we do with Joy Collective is on legal sanctioned walls.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, and actually, I mean, interestingly, with Colossal Media in New York, the reason for them kind of existing is that it's illegal to put posters on most of the buildings in New York, but it's not illegal to paint them. So it was
Right.
kind of this loophole of how can we advertise in these spaces
Mhm.
without hanging a billboard.
Yeah.
So are they paying
Yeah.
for the space that you're painting on, or that just these companies just allow you to paint on their buildings?
Yeah, so normally it's a landlord that we've managed to track down. I mean, wall sourcing is like one of the hardest parts of the job. So
Yeah.
you find a landlord who typically doesn't want to be found for the most part, and then
Imagine that.
and then you say you've got this beautiful facade, this side panel to your wall. Can we paint it? Which again is normally a no. And then if you get over those first few hurdles, then you start talking about money, and it's like, okay, well, will probably bring you in this many in charges for a year. Most brands are going to book it for 2 weeks at a time, or maybe a month, and then from that we will pay you however many thousands to rent your wall from you.
Mhm.
And I mean, for building owners, it's a really great source of income. Not that building owners typically need an extra source of income, but there you go, they've got one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a blank space on the wall that's not being used.
Yeah.
So why not?
It's a,
Yeah,
it's a fun source of revenue for
that's
them.
interesting. Yeah, wow, that just unlocks your brain a little bit there.
Yeah.
Very, very
Well, that's
interesting.
good.
Well, David, in
Mm.
closing, if you would give our listeners a few tips on how companies might be able to better integrate art into their branding and marketing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and how they can do that effectively in a way that resonates with their ideal customer.
Yeah, so I think it's being respectful. I think is the word that springs to mind. Is I think art has so much good feeling for so many people because good art makes people feel something. So
Mhm.
I know people don't buy my work because of what it looks like or who I am. They buy it because of what it makes them feel,
Mhm.
and you can utilize that feeling as a brand if you listen to the creatives that you're working with, and you're respectful of their ideas, and you collaborate to a point where where you're happy on both sides. I think
Mhm.
there's it's such a rich. I mean, it's such a rich pool of talent to work from. I mean, I think artists are some of the most creative people on the planet. And I mean that could be a music artist, it could be someone who writes
Mhm.
poetry, it could be a
Sure.
visual artist, whatever form of art. If they are able to, if they have crafted the skills to be able to make people feel something with the work that they make,
Mhm.
then it's a beautiful thing that you can utilize, but only if it's done authentically on both sides. I mean, I've had my work stolen by Ed Sheeran, which is funny when you think about
Really?
there's been all the court cases for Ed Sheeran and plagiarism,
Oh my
but
goodness.
Wow.
there was a billboard done in Shoreditch, and I kept getting tagged on Instagram like, "Oh, new Ed Sheeran billboard done by David Speed," and I was like, I didn't do this. This is wild,"
Yeah.
and it's all in my colours, and I couldn't believe it, and so I know because of my work with Joy Collective, I know that I will have been on the mood board that was
Mhm.
shown in this thing, and whoever from whatever agency was going, yeah, we want it to look like this because this is really hot right now, especially in this area,
Yeah.
because all of my work was around East London. And I didn't get the call, I didn't get an email or anything. So I ended up going and defacing the this Ed Sheeran brand for a little bit of like PR for myself. You know, I was like,
Really?
well, let's turn this situation and see if I can benefit from it.
Yeah.
Because had I been asked to do a billboard for Ed Sheeran, I probably would have said no. You know, but I think that's luckily I was in the position where having my work stolen didn't really affect me. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't. I didn't need that one Ed Sheeran payday. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I kind of used it as an opportunity to speak about this happening because so often brands will do this with smaller creators.
Mhm.
They'll steal their work or steal an idea, um, and I mean that I think that can do huge damage to your brand.
100%.
Yeah.
And had I gone more more guns are blazing with it on social media, then I'm sure I could have turned it into something. But I didn't want to do that. But I do want to point out that, like, if you are going to be working with these creatives, like if you see an artist on a billboard that gets brought up in a meeting, it's like, well, work with that artist instead of trying to replicate, finding someone else who'll replicate it for cheaper.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for me. And I just think I would, two of my favorite artists, I think work with brands so incredibly well, is a girl called Kelly Anna. She's at Kelly Anna London on Instagram, and she does a lot with Nike. She's worked with Lego. She's worked with like so many brands, and I think every time she's always able to make it completely authentic to her. Like it's her voice, it's her work, and I think her campaigns work beautifully. There's also a girl in Seattle called Stevie Shao. I know she does a lot of brand stuff, and I think her stuff always works really well.
Yeah.
I think the problem is when it's a square peg in a round hole, and it would be like me painting in neon green. It would be like
exactly.
this is it, but that's the guy he's famous for doing neon pink. Why is it neon green? Like there's a disconnect.
Yeah, sure.
So let's all work together to have these creative conversations. Let's throw all of our ideas in. But then at the end of it, let's make sure that the creative is coming out of this shining, because from that, your brand will shine.
100%.
Sure.
I love it.
So at the end of the day, it's creating pieces that resonate with people in a way that creates emotion, essentially, is what you're saying.
I think so. I mean, obviously, like marketing is your field, and I've had experience in it through the work I've done for the last 10 years, but it's certainly not something that I'm an expert in. But I think when it comes to marketing my own work, I try and make people feel something.
Sure.
So every time I put on a solo show, I go and leave 1,000 pieces of artwork in the street. And it's the most insane thing. Like it takes me 2 weeks to create the artwork. I hand finish every single piece, and then I walk. I think I walk 60 miles. Let me just work out how much I walk.
Probably
60 miles in
I need to
4
be
days.
doing that.
And then so in order to distribute 1,000 pieces, I walk 60 miles in 4 days to do it.
Wow.
And I leave these like behind bins and on bus stops, and then I post clues on my stories for where people can find the work. And then on the back of the envelope, there's just a little card that says, I've got a new solo show coming up, and there's a little QR code, and you can scan it, and it gets people to come to my show. But the reason why it works is because people experience something. It's play, essentially.
Right.
And I get so many messages from people saying, thank you for allowing me to be a kid again. And the there's something so like childlike about doing a treasure hunt. It's so fun. And I make sure that the work is good, so that when people actually find this piece of work, it's like they're framed all over the country, and people are really proud, and they feel like they've got something of value. So it costs me a hell of a lot of money to like make the work, 4 days of time to distribute the work. But it's it's not necessarily marketing, but it is marketing. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I wouldn't sit down and go, what's my marketing strategy? I sit down and I go, what's a fun way to get people to interact with this show I've got coming up?
Right.
And
that at the core, that's marketing. I mean, that's what that really is.
I think at this point, people attribute marketing to traditional media.
Sure.
Radio, TV, that type of stuff. But what you just articulated there is so tightly close to your brand, whether you've fleshed that out or not. I mean, you know who you are. You're not green, you're pink. I mean, you are committed to that. So you taking that step to put out and to really draw people in, and that's what I mean, the most effective anything in life is that emotional level, because if the people that we care about and want to be around, we have a relationship with. Well, you can't build a relationship without some emotional connection.
Absolutely.
So what you just articulated is the most brilliant marketing, because you are connecting.
Yes. This has been a great show, David.
Yeah.
This is
Love it.
something that I
Talk
think is
about
not
this a lot
yeah.
longer too.
This is something that's not talked about enough in the marketing and branding world. And we really
agree.
appreciate you coming on today and giving us your insights. We may do this again later because there's a lot more to talk about. I think we've only scratched the surface of this.
100%.
But we really appreciate it. I would tell you happy Thanksgiving, but that won't be your holiday. So we're going to go and tomorrow and gain a lot of weight and just add on some pounds, and maybe we'll do some 60 miles in 4 days afterwards. You think?
Listen, what was it? The goals, the big goals. Yeah, we're gonna do 70.
We might need to do that after the big meals tomorrow.
That's right.
But we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on, and I think you've given our viewers a lot to think about.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
awesome.
Without a doubt.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
No worries.